Okay, today we got to talk about Mike Gundy, a story he refutes, a story Alfred Williams stands by, and how things you say or refuted saying 31 years ago are now relevant in the current climate with the current news cycle, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today, we got to talk about Mike Gundy some more because a day after he apologized on video to everybody for wearing a t-shirt when it's not about the shirt, it's about how your players feel about you wearing that shirt, and it's about what kind of a locker room environment you are creating. We have more news about Mike Gundy. First, there is Doug Gottlieb backing off of what he called a bad tweet where he was disingenuous in what the players were asking for as it relates to changes, saying things like they wanted the opportunity to sag and listing some other what I think are asinine demands. And the kids were very loud and very clear and very quick to shout Doug Gottlieb down. Then later, I got to see the tweet of Shannon Sharpe talking with Skip Bayless on their show Undisputed that airs on FS1, where Sharpe had talked with Alfred Williams, who's a friend of his, about a story in which Williams claimed that Mike Gundy called him the N-word, the one with the hard R, during a 41-17 stomping Colorado State gave to Oklahoma State in 1989, right? Now, I found that to be interesting, and then I saw a news clipping of it from Lou Moore, who does the Black Athlete podcast with Derek White. I read Derek White's Blood, Sweat, and Tears. It's about Jake Gaither and the FAMU Rattlers, and it's really great. I've cited from it a couple of times while doing this show. And then I went looking for it because Lou Moore didn't give us the whole broadsheet, so I didn't know where it came from. I went looking in the Tulsa World. Terry Tush had written a story as a freelance reporter, but it referenced racist marks and not the N-word. I looked at the Oklahoman, the word was also omitted. And then I started just doing what I do with, I'm a private investigator. I got the license to prove it. And I found the story in the November 14th, 1989 St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And I'm going to put it here like I put it on Twitter. And I'm going to read a portion of it for you so that everybody's caught up. I will not use the word, though in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch story, it is the word with the hard R, okay? So this is the part of the Big 8 notebook that you need to hear. Oklahoma State quarterback Mike Gundy played Colorado for the last time in his college career Saturday. For the Buffaloes, it was one time too many. No, the Cowboys didn't pull an upset. Colorado won 41-17. It's just that Gundy upset the Buffaloes by allegedly directing racial slurs at several black CU players. According to Colorado free safety Tim James, Gundy called several Buffaloes N-word. I can't count the number of times he used that word, James said. He has no class. There's no place for that in sports. CU linebacker Alfred Williams said, I hope not very many people raise their children to be like him. He said things he had no business saying to anybody. As for Gundy, he said, it's not true. Following the game in Stillwater, he said they were doing the talking. Why would I say those things? I've been here 4 years and half of my friends are black. Makes no sense. I would also add there were only 4 black players on that team at the time. And I wanted to go a little bit further with this, right? Because I want to see what else was said. And shout to Nate Fakin over at News 4 in Oklahoma City, who found archival footage of Gundy refuting this story once again in 1989, a couple of days after the story ran in the paper and after the game. Now, Alfred Williams has a radio show in Colorado, and he talked about this story on air. And I think that his quote here are also enlightening, right? Because he said 31 years later that he couldn't believe it. There's no walking it back. The story's been out for 31 years. I didn't back down then. I don't back down now. Every time I see him, I just want to run through him. Every time I see his face, every time I look at him, I want to run through him. I'm 51 years old. Why in the world would I need to lie about that? Now, in light of how Mike Gundy has been at the top of the news cycle in college football over the last 3 years, that's the reason that this story is relevant. The other is the folks at Oklahoma State were wildly embarrassed by Mike Gundy and his wearing of that shirt, but also they were embarrassed in April when he purported One American News Network like it's the Associated Press or Reuters, saying there's no left, there's no right, there's no commentary, there's just the news, which is not what that network represents. And even folks that show up for other news outlets like Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, pick your flavor, will say, no, they're over there in another place. They're extreme in this. I also would add in here, Gundy had a bad look to some in April, including myself, when he wanted to get the kids back on campus May 1st to get money running through the state, exposing them, I believe, to the virus. And what do you know? The kids test positive, and they're testing positive all over the country. Texas had 5 test positive today. They had like 6 test positive at Houston last week. And now we're seeing COVID release forms at Ohio State, SMU, and other places becoming the norm. But on top of this, they've also had a really crappy month at Oklahoma State with the death of Eddie Sutton just after he finds out he makes it into the Basketball Hall of Fame, but he will not be around for his official induction. And then Mike Boynton and the Oklahoma State basketball program were hit with what many believe, myself included, are unfair sanctions, like the postseason ban that they're going to suffer. And that puts whether or not they get the number 1 player in the 2020 class onto campus in Cade Cunningham, who was supposed to show up and who people were very excited to see. But if he could make $500,000 in the G League and he would have to miss the postseason if Oklahoma State got there, you could understand why he might absolutely positively not want to go. I think that all of this is going to come to a head for Gundy because I had no idea that this story existed, and I call it a couple of my friends who work in the industry around, and I ended up chatting at length with sports columnist and sports director, and my goodness, I was shocked by how many folks that are much older than me hadn't heard this story. So I wanted to be clear about what was said and what wasn't. And then the story is being picked up nationally as Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio linked back to my tweet in reference to the quotes that he got from Al Williams and relating the story that I just told you that Shannon Sharp told. And we're also seeing what happens with Mike Gundy and what he has to say about this, because as of the publishing of this video, he hasn't had anything to say. And neither has Oklahoma State, right? I'll be interested to see what happens here because as I understand it from Tulsa World sports columnist Bill Haston, Mike Gundy's buyout is about $17 million. And over the next 5 years, he's going to make $25 million. 5 years, $5 million annually for leading Oklahoma State to 15-11 over the last 2 years, which is really the joke here because the buyout at Oklahoma State should have been put into process for mine if you're just 4 games above 500, but that's why they're pokes in the Sooner State. That's a joke. What I am interested in is how the kids are going to take hearing these quotes from Williams and seeing those quotes in the 1989 paper. If I didn't know about it, you didn't know about it, they probably didn't know about it. And whether or not some changes are a little bit more clear. And that's the other thing about the changes at Oklahoma State that we have no idea about. We don't know what changes are being instituted because they haven't been transparent about this. And the news has been slow to come out of Stillwater on what changes are going to look like, even as many of the players on the team are black. And the star running back and the star linebacker, Chuba Hubbard and Amin Ogbagmamiga, are both black. And they have both said, look, we want changes from our head coach. And they applauded him for his video apology yesterday, though it looked forced and read from a teleprompter, and Gundy looked very uncomfortable. And now this news is out today. So we're all going to wait and see. But trying to be as measured as I can with this. But Mike Gundy, I understand that you refuted this. I understand that's your word. I also understand it's Alfred Williams' word. I wonder if this was ever brought up at the hiring process like 2005 when Mike Gundy got the job and how deep the research actually went. And in this age where we are trying to hold more people accountable and we are seeing more folks try to be more inclusive in their businesses and in the way that they advertise and in the way that they push themselves forward, maybe Oklahoma State's going to have to get something real drastic going on at Stillwater, and maybe that starts with Mike Gundy. All right, that's it for me. Doses.